Can I get a shout back from someone if you're hearing me? So John's having a little bit of issue on his side, audio problems, and so he's working on figuring that out. And he asked me just to open things up and greet everyone.
I just have but during the last meeting that we had, you had talked about the OTS method of getting a queen.
Yeah,
And so I looked it up and I tried it and it worked.
good for you.
And I was really surprised. So made me happy because it gave me another level of control.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really nice little system in order to, just make a few queens. I've made on the order of, I don't know, 40 or 50 at a time. It gets a bit hard on resources at that point because you're not using queen builders and incubators and mating nukes and things like that. Um, so, the downside for me was anything that didn't work out, anything that either didn't emerge or didn't mate, used up an entire frame from one of my strong hives,
Mm.
and that became too big a drain on me. But for creating a smaller number of queens, or requeening. If you're requeening a colony, go in there and take that old queen out, or do whatever you want with her, and then OTS that colony. I last summer had I moved my bees to my out yard and did a last little inspection between them before the honey flow, and I found one of them queenless. Actually, I found two of them queenless, and so I did OTS right there. One of them didn't requeen successfully, but the other did. So it was a nice little fast maneuver.
I wish there was some way, well, if we could talk about this whole thing of requeening and when to requeen and how many years you should keep a queen if a queen is
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know anything about that. So,
Well, I'm no expert. I don't know everything. I'm still only 5 years in. I've only kind of decided for myself what my requeening strategy will be as far as timing goes. And for me, and I'm maybe not in the same situation as everyone else. Um, I'm what you'd call a small commercial. Some people might call sideline, but I don't fit that model because I don't have another job. So I consider myself small commercial. And so bottom line is important to me. Productive queens are very important to me, and making sure they're productive through the honey flow. So for me, I've adopted the strategy that if she's not last year's queen or this year's queen, she's done, because quite likely she won't live through this winter anyway. Very rarely, I've found that they'll make 3 winters, or 2 winters for that matter. So I just cut them off at two seasons. So I'll raise a new queen. She'll go through winter. She'll go through that summer, go through winter, the next summer, and if she survives another winter, then that'll be her last winter. Um, and so that's what I've started doing. But honestly, I decided to do that last year, and so this is my first summer actually doing that. And so I used a combination of the OTS system and grafting queens in a cell builder in order to do that requeening.
so when is the latest that you can requeen a hive where,
That's a good question. I've been talking to a lot of people about making late splits, and that's a kind of an advanced maneuver that I'm going to try to learn. And they're talking about making splits right up until almost Labor Day. However,
hmm.
it's not the same game as making a split in May or June. So it's a very advanced maneuver, and I'm very tentative to even try it. But for me to requeen and have a queen mate and begin to lay and be a productive queen that's going to winter well, I want her mated easily by the end of July, hopefully mid-July at the latest, so that she has time to build up a new nest. She'll lay hard. However, when you OTS a colony, if you're going to requeen by using OTS, then you've got a long brood break. So then you have no new bee production in that colony for 3 weeks easy. So you've lost a lot of momentum in that hive. So you don't want to lose that momentum too late, because the queen's natural rhythm is to taper off laying after solstice. Now, a newly mated queen will lay hard for the rest of the summer. They'll lay harder than a overwintered queen through that. So I'm finding there are no hard and fast rules. It's kind of, how hard you want to work at it, and what your goals and objectives are, and when you want to do it. And requeening with cells is nice, because if you don't want to look for the queen, you don't have to. Put a cell in that hive and the virgin will take care of the old queen for you.
Oh,
Um, I've started to mark queens, so my queens are a lot easier to find. So I can go into a colony and find the queen. I've found a number of them. I can't remember how many nukes I made. I took the frame that the queen was on and put it in a nuke just to keep that old queen laying for the next few weeks. And so that I thus made the colony queenless. And so I'd either insert a cell or I heard that cough, John. So you're getting
Oh
somewhere.
my God.
There you are. Or I would do OTS on the then queenless hive. And but then again, they're going to be queenless for weeks with no laying. But then I can kind of just hands off that and throw that into honey flow, and then come back Labor Day and see if it worked. If it didn't work, then combine or do whatever else with those resources.
okay,
But
thank you.
yeah, welcome. So over to you, John. Do you want host role?
No, I just let's just leave it at this. Just make sure that this sticks. My apologies, everybody. I have actually participated in 2 Zoom meetings before and was the host of one for a garden center chat, and I thought I kind of knew the at least how I can get my microphone connected. So my bad. Again, just growing pains. A lot of people are going to be asking, why are we using Zoom instead of Webex, which we've used many times successfully in the past? That is basically, we're test driving this platform for ease of use. And again, I'm not going to blame Zoom for that. That's my operator error. But in the end, Red River has to pick a platform, because when September comes around, we're going to want to do virtual meetings on a larger scale if COVID prevents us from meeting in person. So we just want to make sure that if that's the case, we're prepared for it. So this novice session, and again, thank you very much, Brad, for touching base on queens. That was one of the topics on the list, and we can go back to that too, where like there's lots of material there for sure. But it's also to check base with people that are not 100% certain on where they should be when we're right at the cusp of the honey flow. And if you look around and if you drive around and see what's starting to bloom at this time, we are starting to see field clover, and a lot of sweet clover is starting to come up as well in the ditches. I don't think there's any agriculture crops like canola isn't anywhere near to us yet. And that's one crop that a lot of people are waiting for, because they do hive sites just for that kind of that nectar flow. But one of the things I want to talk to you about today, especially when it comes to your brood chambers, is one, being queen right, which Brad touched on, making sure that when you start putting on your honey supers, uh, the beekeeping game changes, because now it's not a question of a little bit of smoke and taking off the lid and going through a few frames. It's a question of removing honey supers that can be 50, 60, 70 pounds. And people have a tendency to not do um, close checks, even if hives are in trouble, or mite checks throughout the honey flow, because they're busy and because that taking off a couple of really heavy boxes and dealing with the bees in that environment is naturally dissuading. So right now there is a golden opportunity, and I'm not saying don't keep an eye on your bees during the honey flow, but what I am saying is now is going to be the easiest as it gets for the next 4 weeks. So making sure that you're queen right and the laying is good, making sure that your mites are under control, because there are very few treatment options for during the honey flow. And even the ones like oxalic acid or formic are not really recommended. And as well, making sure that your hives are balanced. One of the greatest tools in the belt during the honey flow is to make sure that all the colonies in your yard, unless you've set up nukes, are balanced, and making sure they're all equal strength, so that when you know it's time to super up or add more supers, it's not an individual by individual colony decision. It's almost like a yard by yard decision. And even if you've got a yard of 2 colonies or a yard of 10 colonies, the principle is the same. Now, this is a little bit past tense, but how balancing works is by basically removing frames of brood and eggs and adding and swapping them out with weaker hives to sort of get your population all the same, so that when they do start the nectar flow, it's sort of more of a constant across the board of your colonies. But again, those queen checks are really important. The other topics, as well, as we are coming into some incredibly hot weather, and even in, I've noticed in the chat, there was yeah, how is this upcoming hot weather, how is that going to affect my hives? Well, they're pretty good at regulating their temperatures. I mean, their efficiency drops down when it gets really hot because they're focusing more on cooling than they are on collecting. But they will be collecting as much water as possible instead of nectar. Now, access to a water supply becomes really, really critical, because if they have to fly very far for water, that um, gives them a bit of a disability in keeping that hive as cool as possible. As well, if your yard placement is like full direct sun, not along a tree line, not along where there's some shade, that's a factor too. Colonies will do just fine right in the middle of an open field. It's done all the time. But any little advantage you can give them will be a bit more beneficial towards how they're able to get through plus 30 or plus 32 days. So make sure, like, I mean, I'm a big fan of upper entrances, for winter and for really hot summer days, because they can use convection to help blow heat out the top entrance. And again, if they don't have access to water, even if you're taking like pans and draping nylon screen through it so that you're not creating drowning pools, that becomes pretty important, because they'll seek it out too, right? If you're doing urban beekeeping, or if you're in a yard site where you've got close neighbors, especially neighbors that have horses or animals that use watering troughs, those bees are going to become a nuisance. And I've already done 2 little olive branch peace meetings between beekeepers and landowners, where bees that were a mile away were just beelining right to these watering troughs for these horses. And it was causing a lot of issues, because horses won't drink from a watering trough if there's bees around, because they'll get stung once and then they become shy. And dehydration in horses is a huge issue. So don't be that kind of a beekeeper. Make sure that you are taking care of your bees and not letting them become a nuisance for somebody else, because it's just the right proper thing to do. So we are weather. I'm just going through some of these comments here. Jack Lavalley, I think overall the canola is going to be later than normal, which should actually work out good, as it will come on as the clover slows down. I think you're right. Every year, you cannot guarantee anything anymore. The weather is very inconsistent. I know last year this time we were praying for rain, and we've had like lots and lots and lots of rain. And then if you're in southern Manitoba, well, you're halfway underwater. So that effect, and some of the of that has been some cool weather as well, which retards growth of canola and other crops. So to turn around and calendar your operation as in, well, canola is going to start on this day, this week. Good luck with that. That doesn't quite work. There's always going to be some fluctuation. And if you have a really, really wet spring where you've got flooding out and farmers need to reseed, that's really bad for them, but it's really good for us, because you'll get staggered planting of crops like canola and sunflower, and you'll have a really large extended bloom as well. I'm just going to unmute Brad here. So overall, and again,
was I making gestures at you? Was I unmuted
I don't,
there?
I don't. Yeah, you were muted there. I'd like to leave you unmuted because you're sort of being wingman today.
Well, I was saying thank you, sweetie, because my wife brought me coffee, and I didn't want you to think I was coming on to you.
Well, I'll be seeing you tomorrow, so we'll test that out. No, other than that, this is one of the primary objectives of this webinar, is to sort of do a test where if anyone's having trouble or issues, or if anyone's not really sure where they should be at this time or where they are at this time, is to sort of to speak up. So
John, I have a comment, an anecdotal comment on the water thing. And I know water is very important to them. And I know water is very important to them solely by the fact that if there's water anywhere, they're in it. I went out there the other day and it had rained a lot and there was puddles everywhere. And there was, if you have equipment or anything laying around, there's going to be certain things that catch water and hold a little puddle of water. And every little puddle of water just had bees lined up all the way around it. And the grass was wet and everything was wet, and yet they were hoarding on these little puddles of water all the time. So I know that they just crave for the water, and I know the scientists tell us that they'll haul twice as much water as they will nectar in a season, kind of thing. However, if you recall last summer, it didn't rain after solstice. It didn't rain from solstice till well after. And my honey harvest was exactly on par with my average honey harvest over the last 5 years. That I don't understand. And I've never lifted a finger to give them water in any fashion at all. And I should. I'm just lazy. And I never have. So that really, it doesn't add up to me.
Well,
How they were
sometimes,
getting all that water.
well, sometimes it's luck and circumstance. I've got 19 acres and I've walked it all, and I have on the Petersfield yard about 3 acres of woods, and it's pretty high and dry land. And there's one little marshy patch in the center of this woods, and I swear it's almost like a 6x6 just sort of depression, and there isn't standing water, but it's like damp. It's like a damp, it's spongy. You can tell when you walk by it. And the bees will go there and they will basically not, they don't necessarily have to access standing water. They can actually just like suck it out of wet leafy material, even soil. It's they're pretty adaptable that way.
Yeah.
And you may not be watering your bees, but your bees are they have to be, they're finding it somewhere, and there could be a depression, a slough, a wet ditch, an outlet pipe for gray water. Even you never really know. But if your bees are healthy and you're getting your crop, it's somewhere within a mile or so of where you are. There's got to be a source, and if they're not
Yeah,
hassling your,
there's lots of swamp around here, so there's
yeah,
always a
so
ditch or something.
so and if, or and you'll see it when they're really seeking for it, like your dog's water bowl, the drip from your garden hose faucet. They will be all over things like that. And
Yeah.
and if you're in an area where water is challenging, you can just set up watering stations the same way you set up feed. If you're doing any yard feeding, I've taken 15-kilogram honey pails, like that's been converted to pail feeders, um, and just used water, and they've worked really, really fine.
Okay. Thanks.
So if you haven't used Zoom before, there is the same hands up function. If you go down to the lower right hand side of the screen, there's a little icon with 3 dots, and you clip that, and there's a raise hand button. So if anyone has any questions, I'm going to be scanning the group, and or anything to add or any anecdotes, feel free to raise your hand. I'll unmute your mic, and we can deal with what you're having. As well, I'm just scanning chat if you've got anything to share as well. And in the meantime, Brad, how you may have touched base on this before, but how did those queens work out?
Horrible. Almost complete failure. 100% my fault. And I'm completely embarrassed to even talk about this. Basically, I made a huge error, and I don't know why I made this error, because I've been in this long enough to know better, and I know how to compensate for this. It's very easy. And my error was stalking my mating nukes and not allowing them time to settle into their new location. And that was compounded by, so I had a lot of flyback. So my mating nukes were highly depleted. And that was compounded by the fact that, again, being lazy, I left them here with 75 full colonies, and they got beat up on real bad, really bad. They had, my first year with my minis, so they have no onboard resources. Trying to feed them, that is just a disaster. So completely robbed out of 21 queens that I've placed to mate. I think I have 2 mated and 1 other that I've seen. So it was a real disaster. 100% my fault. I'm sick over it, because now we're going into the 1st of July, and I I have nothing to speak of yet. I was planning to have, all these queens. Fortunately, I did requeen a number of my colonies using the methods I talked about just a minute ago. A number of them I did an OTS on them. So again, mating success being what it is, there's not going to be 100%, but hopefully I can get another round of queens going and compensate for that shortfall. And some of them I dropped cells into on my last round of harvesting my builder. So because those are full colonies sitting in place with full resources on board, etc., they're not getting robbed out. They'll be just fine. So that's how it went. However, the good news is grafting ain't that hard. You know, you get on to how to find the young larva. There are a number of things that I want to do this winter to set myself up better next summer for grafting. I want to build myself a queen timing box where I can move in an empty comb on day 1 and then retrieve that empty comb on day 3 and graft from that. I found it a little bit challenging to just kind of randomly pull a comb and then get enough young enough larvae off of that particular comb to fill the cells, because you know they're kind of all different ages, and the queen doesn't just lay on one frame at a time unless she's forced to, hence the queen timing box. And the other thing that I want to construct is an incubator for next year, so that you know, it helps me with my timing, plus it removes the danger of done right, it removes the danger of one of the cells emerging early and destroying the rest of cells. Some people saw the picture I put on Facebook. I was harvesting my cells the other day, and I had 3 bars or 4 bars of cells in there, and I came down to the last bar, and there was 5 cells on that bar, and I pulled it out of the builder, and one of the cells, this one right in the middle, had a nice round hole in it with a trap door, and the little virgin had come out into my builder. Fortunately, it was the last bar, and the other 4 cells were still okay. But that really reinforced to me the need for an incubator, to get those out of the builder into an incubator, into a system where if they emerge, they're encapsulated somehow, probably just a foam carrier. So my builder is now a mating nuke, and I need to build a new builder.
Now, just out
Could
of
have been worse.
curiosity, Brad, you don't cage your queen cells?
No, I haven't. The cages that I have don't work with the JZBZ cells.
I've found that there's like there's a lot of Genter and Genter knockoffs, and or not even knockoffs, just slightly different. Nothing's compatible with anything. I was foolish.
Do those hair roller cages work with the Genter system as well? I know they work with the NICOT system.
Yeah, they do, but they have to be Genter cages, so roller cages. But I think
I love that idea. I would love to do that. Just put that cage on there, and Bob's your uncle.
And honestly, it's one of those things where heading towards building or purchasing an incubator, when you're dealing with queen rearing, which can be such an important component of your season, you know, it's definitely worth investment for, like, I've always kind of,
I've built a couple already. They're just way too big, so I just need to build a smaller one, right? They're not that hard.
I got a couple of questions. One, I got a question for Jack, Jack Lavallee. Can you hear me, Jack?
Yep.
One is, how are your bees going? If I'm not mistaken, you were doing some expansion this year, yeah?
Well, I was trying, but the bears gave me a licking. So now I'm trying to do a late expansion because they took the best ones, of course. That's why I was asking when and how to split and stuff to grow back to where I was. Well, I sold some in the spring, and then the bears took care of some.
So can you just kind of share with what happened with your bear experience? Because I actually found set up a new yard this year that I haven't been before, and it's right along a creek bed. And someone mentioned to me that, better start thinking about bears. And I actually priced out a couple of electric fences, some at PV Mart and some at this other farm supply store, and it wasn't incredibly expensive. But can you kind of tell me what happened with yours, and how if you had any preventions, and how you're going to move forward with that?
Well, I had just put up like the tread-in electric fence post. I had around it in 5 wires, I think, and I was running one of the solar energizers from PV Mart or Co-op or whatever. like a 6-volt solar energizer, which puts out 5,000 volts. And they put their hand through, I guess, and they liked the taste, and they had no problem pushing down all that. So I need a much stronger fence. I'm now running a 12-volt solar energizer. I can't remember what model it is, and it's pushing out like 9,000 energized volts. And I haven't had them come back in, but they poked around for a long time.
Well,
On
once
a controller, if I can jump in, it's the joules you're looking for, not volts. And I don't know, I thought controllers ran in order of 40,000, 50,000 volts, but regardless, it's the joules you're looking for. I had a small
I went
solar powered one as well.
one
And
with
then
that.
I got a picture of a bear inside my fence one night from my game cam. So then the next day I went and bought a bigger controller, and it's 1.9 joules is the output. I think it says the other small solar one was 0.04 joules, which is nothing compared to 1.9. And Patriot has a pretty good little graphic on what their controllers are built for. Add
Yeah,
little
that's
animals.
the
It starts with chickens and goes up to dogs and cows and Godzilla at the top, kind
I
of thing.
went up to the one that has a picture of the bear now.
Okay, can you refer me to that graphic, because they seem to have stopped using that table, and I don't know if it's because bears are just an unknown entity, but that's the one I bought, and it's the PBX 200, and it's the 12 volt with the solar panel. It takes a 20 watt solar panel. I have a 40 watt on it, so it works great. So yeah, and you know what? I know my bear. I think you'll be pleased with it because I know my bear has been around, but I have no evidence of the bear ever being inside my fence since I put that PBX 200 up on there.
You guys play around with ground wires in there too with your lives, or just all live wire?
I
I
had
only
3
know-
live.
What's that?
Go
Just
ahead,
three?
Jack.
Okay.
I'm running only like 5 live wires and a grounding hose.
Yeah, I have sheep at home too, and I find that you putting in like a ground wire seems to make a big difference. Like especially if you wear boots and you grab, like I moved away from the solar one just because I'm closer to the house. I was able to get, and then you can really get a good shock. But like especially if you're wearing boots and you grab that line, like you'll feel a tickle. But if you grab the line and you grab the ground line, like look out, it's like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
throws you. So I found adding the ground to make a bit of a difference. So I don't know if that would work or not for bears too, but.
I run 4 wires, 3 hot, and then at ground level there's another wire. You can't even see it because the grass is overgrown and whatnot. It just gives a really nice ground all the way around the perimeter. And my apiary is not super big, so it's
If you're
not a
having
great
problems, I would
investment to run
try
that 4th wire.
Yeah, it's true. I would try it if you're having problems. Consider running a ground one part way up, because then if they're sticking their paw or they head between and they touch the ground one and the live one at the same time, they should get a pretty good jolt from that compared to like if the ground's dry and they're just sitting on grass. But if you drive that that big stake in the ground, that might help. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, no problem so far where I am. I know he's around. If I leave anything out, he'll smash it. But he's not touched anything inside that fence, which I'm so pleased with.
One of the
Yeah, they're still around in our yard because we've seen them.
well, they're going to be around and a nuisance until there's decent food source. They're going to until berries or they've got something that they can feed on other than what they're just grazing on. Honey is going to be just interesting, and the problem is if they are able to get into your yard or get some kind of motivation where this is a possible meal, they will come back. The good thing is that if you shock the living hell out of them, it does somewhat dissuade them for sometimes they just realize it's just off the table for them. So I don't really care what kind of fence you have. If you have a starving bear, they will bulldoze right through that. But in the end, it's just dissuasion that's the biggest thing. And there's a reason why it's legal for beekeepers to shoot bears on nuisance in this province. If you do have a lot of damage, or if you do have a yard taken out, Jack, are you going to apply for compensation with the province?
No, because you have to do it and have it inspected, like reported and inspected within 72 hours of the incident.
And
I didn't.
You
I
chose
didn't.
not. You chose
I
not
asked
to, or
Riel
you
about
didn't?
it on like 4 days. I didn't, because I didn't talk to Riel about it until 4 or 5 days later, and it was too late by then.
That's
You have 72 hours.
I'm not sure the reasoning of that, but it's,
I don't know who makes up these arbitrary numbers like that.
And I didn't know. I didn't know the system well enough.
Yeah, it's a hard first lesson. Like, I've known a couple of people that have had issues with bears. Bee Project, Chris Kerouac got lost a yard early in, and ironically, he was on his way with his electric fence to set up, and he came to see mass destruction. I know Justin Colano also, last year lost a chunk of bees. Now these guys are larger beekeepers, and so they know the laws of the land. But yeah, it's good to know, Jack, that if anyone else here has bear issues, get on the compensation right away. Otherwise, after 72 hours, you've kind of disallowed yourself. And that being said, from what I hear, don't expect gold falling from the sky for compensation either. If Brad, you might be able to confirm this. I think they pay for your bees and they pay for your woodenware, but any potential crop is gone. So it's I don't know.
Can't remember if the crop is included, but yeah, there's a whole schedule of what, and that's one of the jobs of the MBA. They ask us every year to update the list of, what does a box cost, what does a frame cost, what does a lid cost, and all that kind of stuff. I could refer back to that if you'd like and see if the honey is
And the
listed
bees
there.
are placed.
We have to specify what's the price of a colony, what's the price of a nuke, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and I would think maybe the honey is included there, and that may be part of
depending on the
reasoning.
I think it might be depending on the year, time of year, Brad. Like if you've got 4 honey supers on, they'll compensate it. But if this happens right before the flow, they're not going to compensate you for what the bees would have brought. I think it's just for
what you lost.
But in the end,
future. I don't think they're going to compensate you for future. I think it's a loss compensation, not a future value compensation.
Which is, and I can understand where they're coming from, but I mean, it's still it kind of sucks.
But they give you money for another colony. So presumably, if you can source, that's probably the biggest challenge, sourcing. If you can source another colony, they'll pay for the other colony, put that in place. Then your future value is, presumably mostly back. So that's probably how they're looking at that.
Well, better than nothing, I guess.
Better than nothing. And that's probably why they have the 72 hour, because right now there's not much flow around here. And if you leave, a smashed up box of honey laying on the ground in 72 hours, there's not going to be honey left in it. So, MASC needs to come and look at it, because they'll come and say, well, there's a bunch of empty comb here. And you say, well, a day ago it was full of honey. Not anymore.
Sure. I have a question, hand raised up. Why asked to unmute? Sorry, I'm having a little trouble, Richard.
No problem.
Okay, you had a question, sir?
Yes, I'm in my 3rd year, and I've been double brood boxing for the first couple, and this year I've decided to go to single brood box. Just again, a friend recommended it to me, and she's been doing it for 5 years, and she's just said, it's like when you're actually like the husbandry of looking in the boxes. Once you kind of get into that second box looking for the queen and what's going on, everybody's getting a little antsy, and single boxing is easier to look after. And you guys, again, just for people who are new, just kind of go over the probably advantages and disadvantages of double and single brood boxing?
Yeah, in a nutshell, the double brood chamber gives you a little bit or a lot more leeway when it comes to wintering because you've got a lot of extra resources. And so there is that sort of cushion of protection, trying to get into the colony, let's say in March or early March to check for resources isn't as critical because they potentially have an extra 30 or 40 pounds of feed when they started the winter. Also, you've got a larger brood laying area for the queen. So in my experience, it's not making your colony swarm proof by any stretch of the imagination, but it gives you a little bit more leeway in checking for swarm cells or having any kind of brood congestion for that swarm mentality to start to percolate. So it's sort of suggested, especially for novice beekeepers, to consider starting out in doubles because you kind of have those I don't want to say you have to spend less pay less attention to your colonies, but it's a little bit more forgiving if you make a mistake or skip a visit, something like that. Now, the downside to doubles is you're using twice the amount of equipment. If you have a colony loss through the winter, you've got twice as much cleanup. If you you are leaving a lot more honey in the colony over the winter, so that's going to impede on your crop. If you're starting out, you've got a lot more drawn comb to produce before you start seeing results off that colony.
Could have
So
twice the mite treatments too.
yeah, and twice the
Higher
mite
cost.
treatments. So it is definitely a preference. I used to run doubles and now I run singles, but it's more so of your animal husbandry has to be a lot more on point.
Yeah.
When you're looking, as you get more experienced, you know what you're looking for. And it's sort of a natural graduation to singles, I think, because it is a lot, especially if you're looking for a queen, marked or not. It's so much nicer to go through 10 frames instead of 20. Because
20 frames looking for a queen is just a suicide mission.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I did the same as what Brad said. I marked all mine this year too. So, I mean, that's made a big difference.
Mm-hmm. No,
But,
so I hope, you know what, and if you're graduating to singles, just keep in mind you've just got to be a lot more attentive and
yes.
really be up on your swarming, making sure
My
that
advantage too is that my bees are just in my yard at home. So I mean, it's just a walk down the yard. I've not got to travel. So that was again part of my thought pattern with this. Yes, I can look more often because again they're very local to me, so it's an easy fix.
Yeah, no, and it's especially that kind of convenience and being able to pop out to your back door and doing that after work is a huge advantage.
Yeah,
I'm getting a real sense for people who, because as I said, I don't have a day job. This is my job, and that's a real luxury for me because I deal with so many people. They have the day job and they just can't abide by the bees' timing. The bees don't care what you have on. They don't care what day it is, and they don't care what else you have in your life. They're gonna do what they do, and and a lot of times it catches me off guard, even though because there's other things I have to do too, not just spend all my days in the bee yard. So I really feel for people who can't. I dealt with someone who's asking me for advice not long ago, and they described a situation, and I said, "Oh, you better get out there and do this right now." And it was like Tuesday, and they said, "Okay, we'll do that this weekend." I'm thinking, "Oh no, not this weekend. This will be a disaster tomorrow or the next day if So yeah, sometimes you need that leeway, and I know he didn't mean it disparaging to anybody, but I have heard Riel typify doubles as training wheels. They're definitely something to give you that leeway, give you that ease into the lion's den kind of thing. Yeah, I went doubles, I don't know, a couple of years ago, And I say the same thing that other people have said to me: never go back. Singles, I should say. I said doubles, but I went to singles a couple of years ago, and my hives get to be doubles in the spring, in May and June, and every time I lift an upper brood box, I just say the same thing: I hate doubles.
Yeah.
I hate doubles. The singles are so much easier.
Awesome. So that hopefully that answers your
Yeah,
question.
perfect. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Just to touch base on our chat, our group chat here. KC Farms had a good suggestion. If bears keep coming back, you may want to use a live cellular camera. You can get an alarm as soon as one comes close. Again, that's great if you're living on the property where your bees are or out your back door, because but charging out into the dark after a bear, make sure that you at least have lots of noisemakers, flashlights, and guns, because that's not always the I mean, sometimes it's good to know that they're around and you can blast an air horn or scare them off in some way, but just don't put yourself in danger either. But absolutely, game trail cams, cell cams that have, or security cameras that have infrared or auto censoring are a good tool to use. So thank you very much for that. Another question in chat is, I had a neighbor ask about bromine in his water fountain and if that affects the bees. Now, I'm not 100% sure what or why bromine is in his water fountain. It might be a conditioner for algae or fish. Just kind of wanted to, if anyone knows, has an answer to that question, can you raise your hand? Because I can't multitask fast enough to Google. Generally speaking, bees always seem to seek out the most skunkiest water, and they're smart enough. Oh, here, Jeremy. Jeremy, can you hear me?
Bromine's usually used in as like a hot tub treatment.
Ah, okay.
So it kind of kills like the bacteria or algae typically. So some friends of mine have, a couple of them have different hot tubs and they use bromine as it's like chlorine basically, but it's a different.
I honestly don't think that it's going to be overly harmful to bees, because bees love swimming pools as well. Like chlorinated water, for some reason, I don't know, maybe it's tasty. But you have numerous complaints every year of pool owners, angry that bees are hampering their, their recreation. So if they're going after the hot tub water, whether it's the splashes on the deck or going right in there, it's probably not harmful. If it is harmful, really harmful, they're probably not going to make it back to the colony. Again, it's not something that's desirable, but bees like to do what bees like to do, and we like to pretend that we're in control. But in the end, they're going to go seek out what they want. So, long answer short, it's probably not that harmful, but it's definitely not desirable.
Quick Google search, and it talked about bromine being used in many uses, but one is in insecticides. Not that it is an insecticide, but maybe it plays a part in the delivery of the insecticide. I would simply ask my neighbor, why is there bromine in your fountain? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? And if it had something to do with killing insects, then maybe I would start to be worried.
It could very well just be to keep it clear. I know some people like it. Water fountains or bird baths, or if you're putting it out for just aesthetics, it's kind of selfish because birds and insects and water feeders are really important for pollinators and all of the life forms.
A lot of fountains are in use because water that has any movement to it, mosquitoes won't lay in that. So fountains are a good use for that. And don't forget that everything is an LD50 as well. There's thousands of people a year die from overexposure to water. However, you need to drink water every day. So there is an LD50. There's a lethal dose of water that's going to kill you. Would you say, oh my God, don't ever drink water? No, you need to drink water. So that's the same with absolutely every element on Earth. There is a lethal dose to everything that you ever contact, and the same with your bees. So you say, is salt in the water, going to kill your bees? Yes, if you put enough in it, it's going to kill your bees. Is a very low amount in the water going to hurt them? No. But what is the LD50? And you can't make those hard and fast rules. Oh my God, there's bromine in the water. It's going to kill my bees. How much? Maybe there's almost none. Maybe there's trace amounts. Maybe there's lots.
Well, there's mercury in fish, right? Like it just
Yeah.
certain is the way it is. Jack Lavely mentioned in chat that if you shoot a bear, you have 10 days to let conservation know. Also, legally, you have to have made attempts to keep the bears out of the bees before you shoot one. I think that's open to interpretation, but conservation's no joke. If you cross or break the rules, the penalties are brutal. So if you have a bear issue, or if you see yourself having a potential bear issue, and as a beekeeper, it's kind of inherent, Google up the rules to make sure that you're compliant. Hands up for any other questions. I'm not seeing anything in chat. If anyone has anything to share as well, or please don't be shy, because we are getting on to 11 o'clock, and that's sort of our hour. I also would like to touch base on Dr. Curry's presentation. I hope anyone that wanted was able to join us. He did a great presentation on feeding, the quality of syrup, and the impact of colony health and wintering losses. I don't know if we're we have permission to release that download, Brad, but I think there's a little bit of polishing going on to make it easier to watch, just some late editing. As well, I've recorded this webinar as well. If people weren't able to meet it, or if there was issues with audio or video, I'll have it available for anyone that wants. I'll be sending out a mass email for both videos availability. Brad, did we have an issue with releasing that Dr. Curry's footage, or no?
No, there was just because it's a longer video, it takes a long time to render in different situations, and it's now been completed, and all that has to be done now is it needs to be transferred and uploaded. So sit tight, everybody. It's working. I've seen the resulting video, and it's as good as the presentation. So it'll be up very, very soon.
And the information is like really worth the time to watch it, because syrup and honeybee health, especially over the winter, it's crucial. If you've got wintering loss issues, this is certainly a component you want to study. Carol, you have a question?
Yes. I live in the city of Winnipeg. I have 4 hives, and the other day we had an inspector come and inspect our hives for European foul brood. And I know Riel had mentioned at that the meeting the other day, that they have had 4 cases in Manitoba. And I'm just wondering if any of those, and I know this isn't an answer but if any of those cases were in the city. And the other thing I'm wondering about is, as an organization, Red River Apiaries Association, if we could have access or talk to the province about access to that data to see how many hives are in the city, how many hives are in certain areas of the city, so that we could look at sort of maybe overpopulation in certain areas or stuff like that. And I don't think the city is really maybe interested in that, but maybe as a group, that is something that we might be interested in.
Well, I can talk to Riel to see how much information he can legally release. I do know for a fact that one of those cases was on the outskirts of the city. In the end, however, it's not about congestion, because there are areas, rural, urban and rural areas where bees are congested just because of good nectar sources. But in the end, it's about diligence, and in the end, it's about making sure that your colonies are healthy, and that is doing or being observant for the signs of American foul brood every time you do a queen check or a swarm check, just checking to see for sunken cells, or doing a toothpick check on a couple of cells if they look kind of suspicious. The last, not the last bee cause, but the one before, there was a 3-page article on AFB and how to identify it. If you really are concerned as well, there are test kits that you can buy at BeeMade that will detect the spores. AFB is quite serious, and it's definitely worth the stress of being alert and and monitoring for it. However, it isn't rampant. So it's not a huge concern worry that 4 cases were in Manitoba, as much as just a reminder for all of us to be vigilant if you see it. And if you see it and you're not sure, remember there's an entire diagnostics lab, and Riel, it will be at your side if you see something that you're just really raising an eyebrow. So yeah, Carol, I'll definitely touch base with Riel to see what kind of information that we can glean from that. I do know the case that I'm familiar with. The colony was one colony and it was burned immediately. But that being said, yeah, it is kind of scary to.
I just wanted to touch back on congestion a little bit. And I know that's not an issue in the neighborhood that I'm in right now, but there is a limited supply in the urban community for food source for bees. It's not like the country where there are a lot more options possible.
Mm-hmm. That's
and
true.
I think,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that I don't feel like the city is probably going to look at or analyze any of that information.
Probably not. And here's why. Urban beekeeping was very much given permission, but the city was quite clear, said and unsaid, on not wanting this to be a Pandora's box. So I do believe that there is a model in place where if 8 people on one block applied for permission and a permit, that there would be some filtering on that, or first come first serve on that. That being said, it's only been a few years, and because urban beekeepers tend to be novices, and there is a certain failure rate there too. You're going to always come across a situation, especially in certain neighborhoods, where you have bees, your neighbor has bees, across the street 5 houses down, they have bees. But in the end, you can only control your own property. And if you find you're in an area where there is an overpopulation of bees, unfortunately, the onus is on you to make those adjustments and to move your colonies. Because in the end, if they get permission, they have the right to be there. And you get this all the time in the country as well. It's not an urban situation. There is turf wars, literally, when it comes to yard sites, traditional yard sites where families have had them forever. They've had unscrupulous beekeepers that suddenly drop off 40 colonies in a corner of a field when people have been beekeeping in that square mile for like 50 years. So it's definitely a hot topic. It's just one where there's limited ability, except for your own actions, to address. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you,
Yeah.
John.
Well, it's not very helpful, but it's just information because I've been
No,
there
well.
before. I've been there before where suddenly you're almost sharing a yard, and it's just part of
I guess my point was that I think this data could be very helpful in a lot of other ways that we could possibly use.
I agree.
As the
I
Red River
agree.
Apiary
I'll
Association.
seek out with Riel to see what he's able to release because I know there's going to be some, privacy.
And I
issues.
want to say, I think it's great that the province is actually doing hive checks within the city as well. And I don't know if it's just because I know they encourage all urban beekeepers to be registered with the province, which I am registered with the province. And I don't know that all urban beekeepers are registered with the province because I don't think that's a mandatory condition with the city of Winnipeg when you apply for a license.
It's mandatory according to the Bee Act by law.
It's mandatory. Provincial
right.
laws, provincial laws supersede, so it is mandatory. But if that law doesn't have teeth, obviously there are going to be people that just don't care or just don't know about it. And again, that's why Red River's around, right? We want to get people properly trained and compliant because it does have an impact. You don't want renegade beekeepers around.
So maybe we have to have more of a liaison with the city then, as as Red River Apiary Association.
We do, Carol. Actually, we do. The problem is, and it's not us. Like we have an agreement with the city to cover swarm calls. We were very helpful, instrumental as an organization in getting urban beekeeping off the ground. Yes. Our challenge is the city is sort of like not the most organized and efficient machine, and we get forgotten about, and to turn around and start to seek information is a process. And at the minute you start asking them to gather data or statistics or perform a service, there's a certain foot dragging that's kind of embarrassing. It's easier to work with Riel because he's an actual provincial liaison. We can always bring it up to the city entomologist, but they're so geared towards Dutch elm disease, beetles, and cankerworms and mosquito control that this is such a back burner issue. It's hard to get the attention, but we can definitely keep trying to do that.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, John, so much.
No, not a problem. Laura, before I get to your hand, there's a couple of questions by Angie. Angie, there's the BCause also what's the link, or do we have access to the BCause? If you're not a Red River Apiarist Association member, if you can go to our website or send me an email, I can get you onto our membership list, and I can get you access to our Dropbox where we have all the back issues of the BCause that have several articles. So feel free to do that. Or you can just Google John Russell or John Russell Honey, and my personal email will pop up as well. There is a question from Jack Lavalley to everyone about late season splits, which I'll talk about in a second. And if we ever get back, and Kaylin Gardner asked, if we ever get back to face-to-face, is there a chance there can be workshops on queen rearing? And absolutely there will be. We had a whole season planned out to be focused on queen rearing, of grafting, of genter systems, of OTS. And of course, COVID came along and smashed all those plans, but we're definitely, we still have the Red River Apiarist's yard, and we're going to be employing that as soon as it's safe to do so. Also, Angie, more information on going from doubles to singles. I think we did cover that pretty extensively. If you missed it, this webinar will be recorded, and we can get back to that. Angie, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
There you go.
We're just running a little shy of time, so I hope I answered your questions. And if not, we can talk privately later on if you like.
Sure, that would be great. Because yeah, I missed the going from doubles to singles
For sure.
segment.
For sure. What I'll do too is I'm gonna, if you look in the chat window, I'm gonna send you a private chat with my email and my cell number where we can talk a little bit later as well.
Perfect.
I want to add to that, John, just to grab me on Facebook Messenger. This invitation goes to just about everybody. If you feel I have anything that, whatever you need to know, you know, happy to give you a chat. It's usually in the evening. If I'm in the bee yard, it's kind of hard to chat, but you know, I'm available there if you shoot me a message, if you think I have something that would be valuable to you.
Thank you.
Brad, before I answer Laura's hand that's up, and thank you for being patient, Laura, can you talk about late season splits or making nukes for winter just really quickly for Jack?
No, yeah, I will share what I've sort of learned, and I haven't learned it experientially yet. The theory is, and this works best for the canola guy. I call them the canola guys, the guys who sit their bees on these big canola flows and get all of their honey by the end of July. So essentially, and I'll try and speak fast so that this doesn't take too much time. Essentially, at the end of their canola flow, for most of August, they really have no flow or not much to speak of, but they have these huge foraging forces. So what they do is basically they take their colonies and they shake packages. So they'll shake packages out of their big fully stocked colonies with all of these unemployed foragers, and they'll add mated queens and make nukes out of them. So that's the basis of it. When exactly they do this, I understand that they can do this right through August pretty much. I don't know that that'll work for me because my flow is low and slow, and I can be having flow to and past Labor Day. So I'm not sure that'll work for me in that context. So is there anything specific in there, Jack, that you'd like me to try and fill in? That's how I understand these guys are doing this. Nope. Is there
No,
anything
I've
specific,
never
Jack?
played around with it late in the year. So.
Yeah, I want to make a couple this year. See what happens. If I ever have you know, success with my actual queen grafting and queen rearing and get more than 3 out of 21, then I might have some queens to make some late splits and see what happens. I'm really embarrassed about my pathetic performance.
So if I try to make nukes up now, how many frames of brood go into them at this time of year?
Well, I don't know what you say, John. 2, 3.
You can get, just because the weather is really nice, you can kind of get away with 2. I've even seen people risk the queen on a 1-frame nuke. Keeping it away from your main yard so it doesn't get robbed out is really, really important. Making sure you move them away from any yard from where they originate from is really, really important. The smaller nuke that you want to make. But you can definitely make pocket nukes. It's not... at this time of year, especially right before the honey flow, it's almost the optimum time to do so for success. It's, again, every frame of bees of brood that you take away from your honey and your money makers it's a trade-off, right?
And you don't need monster nukes or hives to winter, particularly if you're indoors. I did some experimenting with 3 frames. And I actually wintered some nukes on 3 frames. Not great success numbers, but there were a number of them that actually did come out of winter. Not a good way to winter a colony, however, it's a nice way to winter a new queen. If you end up with a queen that's mated in July or August, and you know she's not going to build up, stick her on 3 frames. Maybe put a shake of bees or a frame of brood in there. So it's not really necessary to have a giant colony because it's really the queen is what you need. Then you've got that queen for your May splits.
Laura, thank you for being so patient. What's your question?
I was just going to comment on what Carol had been asking with foul brood. That it's all confidential, because if someone's information is released that they had foul brood, that's going to ruin their reputation in the future, even if they get it under control. If someone can look back and say, you had this 5 years ago, there's no way I'm touching your bees, that's going to hurt them.
You know what?
So that's all
You're
gonna
right.
be-
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, because you know what, AFB happens, and it's not necessarily an indicator of the skill level of the beekeeper or the hygienic qualities of his operation.
Not at all.
And so you're absolutely right. Now, that being said, AFB spores can be active for 40 years. That's why, you know, when you're buying old equipment at auction, or you're using the stuff your granddad had in the back barn, there's an inherent risk there. And
Well, and that's where Rael always says to call him and ask if that person's equipment is good.
yeah, like he has the information. And even if you're moving yards, right? Even if you're moving yards or you're going closer to someone else's territory, Riel can't turn around and say, hey, that guy has a history of AFB or not. But you can turn around and you can say, hey, these are the coordinates I kind of want to move to. Is there ever been AFB reported in this area? And he might release that information. So you can kind of get a ballpark. And you know what? I'll be honest with you. In the one case that I am aware of, and I'm not going to disclose anything personal here, there was AFB in this one colony, and it was in that colony for over a year. And that colony was also very, very healthy. So that's not like AFB doesn't necessarily manifest itself in a sick or weak colony. There was another colony that was 4 feet away from this infected colony for the entire period, and it was tested, lab tested, and there was no sign of it. So it's the contact, the spore contact doesn't necessarily, like, there is a proximity factor, but the big thing is your tools, sharing equipment, giving someone a frame of larvae to jumpstart of larvae and eggs to jumpstart a queen, not sterilizing your hive tools. Those are the things that are propagators of AFB, and those are the things that you do have some control over. It's a serious condition, and it can ruin your entire yard if it creeps up, but you do have some control over it. And when someone has had AFB in their history, they're not lepers. It can happen to anybody.
Well, and that's the point of keeping it confidential, is that that person's reputation is not also going to get destroyed, especially if they have burned everything and done it responsibly. Then there's no reason that they need to pay for that for the rest of their beekeeping career.
Oh,
As far as locations in the city, I doubt people will want to disclose those, because they don't want all their neighbors to know where the bees are. Some people are scared of them being stolen. Some people just don't want their neighbors to realize where the bees are coming from. You could maybe start like a Facebook group and get people to volunteer to put their hives on a map, to maybe get a little bit of a picture, but that would have to be started by the public, not by the city. I doubt that they would disclose, because people would be pretty mad.
You also have to be very careful if you're outing beekeepers, like, hey, I know someone has bees over here. There's a reason why, and you made some very good points on why you want to keep that information private, because theft is an issue, and also people do overreact. And urban beekeeping is important, and that's why public education is important on how bees and humans can coexist. You also mentioned, Laura, that some of the hives you inspected had more honey than the ones outside for this time of year, and that's absolutely that's absolutely correct. But it's also bloom structure. There's so much more forage, especially along the creek and waterways and the riverways, for bees this time of year. However, when the cultivated crops start kicking in, you'll see that role reverse, where, and and generally the statistics support that your honey crop will be smaller urban than in rural. But again, if they're right outside your back door, sometimes that convenience is worth the price of pounds. Thank you very much, Laura. I appreciate your input.
Yeah, no
Did
problem.
anyone else have any other questions or concerns or anything that they wanted to share? Going once, going twice. Okay, thank you very much for joining us, everybody. If you have any questions or concerns, again, Brad are you a moderator, Brad, of that Facebook group?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so there's
The Red River one.
Yeah, Red River Facebook group.
Yeah.
If you have any questions or concerns with mentoring or your mentor, or if you need some support, any of the Red River executive would be more than happy to help you out. Again, thank you very much for joining us, guys. We'll probably have another one of these during or after the honey flow. And again, this has been recorded, so I will be sending out a mass email out with links to the Dropbox or a Google Drive that you can grab a recording of this if you missed part of it, missed all of it, or some of it was unclear due to audio or video issues. Again, thank you very much for joining us today, and safe beekeeping, everybody. Please be careful with COVID. We are not out of the woods yet.
Enjoy the nice weather.
Take care.